My name is Vivian Carter, and I've spent the last decade clawing my way up the corporate ladder at Luminix Tech, a company that prides itself on innovation but hides its ugliest secrets behind sleek glass walls. I'm not one for dramatics. Or at least, I wasn't until recently, but if you're reading this, it's because what happened next changed everything. For me, for him, and maybe even for the industry as a whole. Let me back up just enough to give you context. Luminix isn't your average tech firm. We develop cutting-edge AI solutions that power everything from smart cities to personal assistants. It's glamorous work on paper, but in reality it's brutal. Long hours, impossible quotas, and an unspoken rule: loyalty above all else. That's how they get you, how they keep you tethered to their machine. And trust me, no one embodies that ethos more than our Vice President of Operations, Harrison Drake. Harrison was charming when he needed to be, ruthless when it suited him, and utterly untouchable in every sense of the word. He had charisma dripping off him like cologne, the kind that made people believe he could do no wrong. But here's the thing about men like Harrison: they don't rise to the top without stepping on others along the way. I should know. I was one of those people. It started 3 years ago when I pitched an idea for a new product line called LoomSense, designed to integrate emotional intelligence into workplace communication tools. It wasn't just a good idea, it was revolutionary. At least, that's what everyone said during the initial brainstorming sessions. The team loved it, my manager gave me glowing feedback, and then Harrison swooped in. He didn't steal the concept outright. Oh no, he was far too clever for that. Instead, he took bits and pieces of my presentation, twisted them slightly, and presented them as his own under the guise of refining my vision. By the time anyone noticed, it was too late. My name was erased, and his face was plastered across internal newsletters as the genius behind LoomSense. I'll admit, I cried that night. Not because I cared about recognition. I mean, sure, it stung, but because I realized something crucial: there would never be justice within these walls. Not for someone like me. So, I did what any rational person would do. I buried the anger deep down, smiled through gritted teeth, and kept working harder than ever. Until today. Today was different. The meeting room smelled faintly of coffee and desperation, the air thick with tension. Harrison sat at the head of the table, flanked by executives whose names blurred together after years of forced camaraderie. They were discussing quarterly projections, market trends, blah blah blah, all the usual corporate jargon meant to distract from the fact that most of us were drowning. I sat quietly near the end of the table, notebook open but untouched, waiting for my cue. When Harrison turned to me, his tone was casual, almost friendly. "Vivian," he said, gesturing toward the center of the table, "you've been quiet. Any thoughts?" Oh, I had thoughts. A lifetime's worth of them, actually. But instead of unleashing the storm brewing inside me, I slid a single business card across the polished surface. It glided smoothly, coming to rest directly in front of him. Everyone froze, eyes darting between me and the small rectangle of paper. "What's this?" Harrison asked, picking it up with a smirk. His confidence was palpable, radiating out like waves crashing against a shore. He flipped the card over, scanned it briefly, and frowned. "Ethical Tech Coalition," he read aloud, his voice laced with confusion. "Never heard of it." "You will," I replied evenly, leaning forward just enough to catch his gaze. "They're launching an investigation into misconduct allegations at Luminix. Specifically, intellectual property theft." The room went silent. You could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights above us, ticking away seconds that felt like hours. Harrison's expression shifted from amusement to disbelief, then finally settled on something darker. Anger. "Is this some kind of joke?" he snapped, slamming the card onto the table. "Because if it is, it's not funny." "No joke," I said, standing now, my chair scraping softly against the floor. "Just facts. Facts I've been collecting for 3 years. Emails, timestamps, witness statements, all neatly documented and ready to be handed over to the coalition. Or the press, if necessary." For the first time since I'd known him, Harrison looked rattled. His jaw tightened, and his knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. "You think threatening me is going to get you anywhere? You're delusional." "Not threatening," I corrected calmly, though my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. "Informing. See, unlike you, I prefer transparency. And accountability." The other executives exchanged uneasy glances, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Some looked intrigued, others horrified. None dared speak up. This was uncharted territory for all of us, a lowly senior analyst taking on the untouchable VP. If nothing else, I knew I had their attention. Harrison stood abruptly, towering over the table like a predator cornered. "This isn't over," he growled, pointing a finger at me. "Do you understand? Whatever game you're playing, I'll crush it." "I hope you try," I shot back, meeting his glare with unwavering resolve. "Because the truth has a way of finding its way to the light, doesn't it?" He stormed out of the room, leaving chaos in his wake. Whispers erupted immediately, filling the space he'd vacated. Colleagues approached me cautiously, asking questions I couldn't answer yet. Was I serious? Did I really have evidence? What would happen next? I didn't stay long enough to find out. Grabbing my bag, I slipped out of the conference room and headed straight for the elevator. As the doors closed behind me, I leaned against the wall, letting out a shaky breath. Part of me wanted to laugh, another part to cry. Mostly I felt alive, like I'd finally broken free of the invisible chains binding me to this toxic environment. But revenge, as satisfying as it may seem in the moment, rarely comes without consequences. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. Weeks passed in a blur of whispered conversations, covert meetings, and escalating tensions. The Ethical Tech Coalition began their investigation, sending shockwaves through Luminix. Employees who had once feared retaliation found courage in numbers, coming forward with their own stories of misconduct and abuse. Harrison, predictably, fought back with every resource at his disposal: lawyers, PR teams, smear campaigns. Yet none of it mattered. The dam had broken, and there was no stopping the flood. Amidst the chaos, I found myself spending more time outside the office, seeking solace in places untouched by corporate drama. One evening, while wandering through a quiet park near my apartment, I stumbled upon a small cafe tucked away in a corner. Its warm lighting and inviting atmosphere drew me in, and before I knew it, I was seated at a cozy table, nursing a cup of tea and trying to clear my mind. That's when I saw him. He was sitting alone at a nearby table, laptop open but ignored, staring pensively out the window. There was something familiar about him, though I couldn't quite place it. Dark hair streaked with silver, sharp features softened by fatigue, and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the world. When he glanced up and caught me looking, I quickly averted my gaze, embarrassed at being caught staring. To my surprise, he approached moments later, pulling out the chair across from me without asking. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice low and steady. I hesitated, unsure whether to say yes or no. Something about him intrigued me, though, so I nodded. "Sure. I'm Daniel," he introduced himself, extending a hand. "And you are?" "Vivian," I replied, shaking his hand briefly. His grip was firm but gentle, exuding a calmness that put me at ease. We talked for hours that night, sharing fragments of our lives without revealing too much. Daniel worked in cybersecurity, though he hinted at a deeper involvement in ethical tech initiatives. He listened intently as I spoke about my frustrations with Luminix, nodding sympathetically but never offering judgment. In return, he shared stories of his own battles against corruption, painting a picture of a man driven by purpose rather than profit. By the time we parted ways, I felt lighter somehow, as if carrying the burden of my vendetta had become slightly easier. Over the following weeks, our chance encounters turned into intentional meetings, each conversation peeling back another layer of the walls we'd built around ourselves. Slowly but surely, I began to realize that Daniel wasn't just a kindred spirit, he was becoming something more. Yet even as our connection deepened, shadows loomed on the horizon. Harrison wasn't done fighting, and neither was I. The question remained, could love truly blossom amidst the wreckage of corporate revenge? As Daniel and I grew closer, the lines between my mission for justice and my growing feelings for him began to blur. He was unlike anyone I'd ever met, grounded, empathetic, and fiercely principled. While most people would have run from the chaos surrounding me, Daniel walked straight into it, offering support without judgment. But there was also something guarded about him, a quiet intensity that hinted at secrets he wasn't ready to share. One evening, after another long day of navigating the fallout from the Ethical Tech Coalition's investigation, we found ourselves back at the cafe where we'd first met. The place had become our sanctuary, a neutral ground where we could escape the noise of the outside world. That night, however, Daniel seemed unusually restless. His fingers tapped rhythmically against his coffee mug, and his gaze kept drifting toward the window, as though he were waiting for something, or someone. "You're distracted," I said, finally breaking the silence. "What's going on?" He hesitated, then sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "There's something I need to tell you, Vivian. Something complicated." My stomach tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Okay, tell me." Daniel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I didn't just stumble into that cafe the night we met. I was there because I'd heard about what you were doing, about your fight against Harrison Drake. And I wanted to meet you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Wait, you knew who I was? Before we even spoke? I knew of you, he clarified quickly. Not personally, no. But I've been following the situation at Luminix for months now. Your name came up in conversations with some of my contacts. When they mentioned you were planning to expose Harrison, let's just say I couldn't resist seeing you in person. I stared at him, stunned. So this whole thing, our friendship, whatever this is, it started because you were curious about my revenge plot? No, he exclaimed, reaching across the table to take my hand. That's not why I stayed, Vivian. Yes, I came to see you initially out of curiosity, but everything after that has been real. Every conversation, every moment we've shared, all of it means something to me. You mean something to me. His sincerity was evident, but doubt lingered in my mind. How much of what he told me about himself was true? Was he truly invested in me, or was he using me to further his own agenda? I pulled my hand away, needing space to process. Why are you really involved in ethical tech? I asked pointedly. You've hinted at things, but you've never given me specifics. Who are you working for, Daniel? For a moment, he looked conflicted, as if torn between protecting himself and being honest with me. Finally, he exhaled sharply and nodded. Fair enough. You deserve the truth. He explained that he worked for an independent watchdog organization dedicated to exposing corporate corruption. They operated under the radar, gathering intelligence and building cases against powerful figures like Harrison Drake. Daniel's role was to identify potential whistleblowers and offer them guidance without revealing his affiliation. In essence, he was a recruiter, but one driven by genuine passion rather than profit. And when you heard about me, I said slowly, piecing it together, you thought I might be useful to your cause. Yes, he admitted. But Vivian, listen to me. I wouldn't have stuck around if I didn't care about you. What started as professional interest turned into something deeper. I can't explain it fully, but being with you feels right. Like I've been looking for something my whole life, and now I've found it. Despite his earnestness, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was walking into yet another trap. Hadn't Harrison manipulated me in much the same way, pretending to value my contributions while secretly undermining me? Yet deep down, I wanted to believe Daniel. There was a vulnerability in his eyes, a raw honesty that felt impossible to fake. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed insistently in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. Meet me tomorrow. 10 a.m. Rooftop lounge at the Lexington Tower. What's wrong? Daniel asked, noticing my expression shift. I'm not sure, I murmured, showing him the message. Do you think it's related to the investigation? It could be, he said cautiously. Or it could be a setup. Be careful, Vivian. Careful. That word echoed in my mind as I tried to sleep that night. Careful was all I'd been since starting this journey, yet danger seemed to follow me everywhere. Still, something about the cryptic message compelled me to go. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe desperation, or maybe just the hope that answers lay on the other side. The next morning, I arrived at the Lexington Tower early, scanning the rooftop lounge for any sign of who might have summoned me. The space was sleek and modern, with panoramic views of a city skyline. A light breeze carried the scent of fresh coffee, mingling with the faint hum of distant traffic below. Vivian Carter, a smooth voice called out behind me. I turned to see a man approaching, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. His dark hair was slicked back, and his piercing blue eyes locked onto mine with unsettling intensity. Who are you? I demanded, instinctively taking a step back. My name is Adrian Locke, he replied, extending a hand that I ignored. I represent certain parties interested in resolving the situation at Luminix. Parties? I repeated skeptically. What kind of parties? Adrian smiled thinly, clearly amused by my suspicion. Let's just say they have significant influence. Enough to make life very difficult for Mr. Drake, and perhaps easier for you, depending on how cooperative you choose to be. Cooperative. The word sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't about justice, it was about leverage. Whoever Adrian represented, they weren't altruistic saviors. They were players in their own game, and I was merely a pawn. I don't negotiate with people whose motives I don't understand, I said firmly, stepping away. Tell your parties to leave me alone. Adrian's smile faltered, replaced by a cold, calculating stare. That's unfortunate, Miss Carter. Because if you walk away now, you'll find yourself facing consequences far beyond anything you've imagined. Before I could respond, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the rooftop, a silhouette framed against the bright morning sun. It was Harrison Drake. You shouldn't have come here, Vivian, he said, his voice dripping with venom. This isn't a negotiation. It's a reckoning. Panic surged through me as I realized I was trapped. With Harrison closing in and Adrian watching impassively, I fumbled for my phone, desperate to call Daniel. But before I could dial, a sudden commotion erupted nearby. Shouts rang out, followed by the sound of footsteps pounding against the rooftop floor. And then Daniel was there, rushing toward me with a look of sheer determination. "Run!" he shouted, grabbing my hand and pulling me toward the exit. We sprinted down the stairs, adrenaline fueling every step. Behind us, voices yelled angrily, but we didn't stop, not until we reached the safety of the street below. Gasping for breath, I turned to Daniel, tears streaming down my face. "How did you know?" I choked out. "I followed you," he admitted, guilt flashing across his features. "After last night, I couldn't risk letting you go alone. Not again." In that moment, despite everything, the danger, the uncertainty, the tangled web of lies, I knew one thing for certain: Daniel cared about me. Whatever his reasons for entering my life, his actions spoke louder than words ever could. As we caught our breath on the bustling street, Daniel turned to me, his eyes filled with urgency. "Vivian, this isn't over. Harrison and Adrian, they'll keep coming. But I promise you I'm not going anywhere. We'll face this together." I wanted to believe him, to trust that love could survive in the wreckage of revenge and betrayal. Yet as I looked into his eyes, I realized the truth. The battle ahead wouldn't just be against those who sought to destroy us. It would also test whether my heart could endure the weight of it all. And so, hand in hand, we walked into the unknown, ready to fight for justice, for each other, and for a future neither of us could yet imagine.